Next is something completely different. And welcome Harshil from Contentful and Berlin. He's a developer advocate, but he loves to share things in videos, blog posts, and all that things, sharing knowledge. So welcome, and I think you need, oh, you have it, okay.
All right, thank you, Ivo, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining in. And thank you to the organizers for organizing this conference. My talk is not at all related to AI. As it says, it's composability, the new architecture in town. You might have heard about composability. You might not have heard about composability, but I'm pretty sure you might have heard about some of the concepts that I'm going to cover in this talk. And a small disclosure, AI was not at all used in any way in this presentation, so it's not at all related to AI. All right. You kind of got an introduction about me, but I would like to know about you. So I've come up with some questions to know about you all. So the first question is like, how many of you access internet every day? Can I get a show of hands? Oh my God, I have my people over here. That's wonderful. Thank you all. But now my other question is, why do we use internet every day? What's the main purpose of it? Can I get some examples over here? Feel free to shout out. To look at cat pictures, I love that. News, all right. Connectivity, wonderful. All right, so I've kind of categorized this in the way that I am using internet, and I feel we can categorize it in the way as well. The first is shopping. Like, you may not necessarily go out and buy stuff online, but you might do a bit of research when you may want to buy a new bike or a new car or even a new house. The next is learning. We saw a lot of things are going to change with AI, and we need to upscale ourselves. But where do we go to learn these new skills? That's where we go to the internet to learn and upskill ourselves. The next is entertainment, to view the pictures of cats on the internet, to view videos, to listen to audio, or just have some fun over there. And the other part is socializing with our friends and family over the internet. One of the recent trends that I see that has increased with socializing is like sharing reels on Instagram and TikTok and all those places. Now, when we think about the consumption that we do on the internet, there is something that sits in between everything else, and that's the content. Whatever we are doing on the internet is somehow or the other way connected to the content. And over the past couple of years, we have seen that the amount of content that has been generated has increased a lot. Even the consumption has increased a lot. This slide was designed a few weeks back. I'm sure the number has changed. I would say roughly 2 billion websites are now online, which means there is tons and tons of content out there. And when we think about this, we also might want to think about how we, our business, can stand out from this competition. We also need to think about the scalability of our applications and how reliable they are. Well, I'm going to help you with this, but first let me give a quick introduction about myself. My name is Harshil Agrawal, and I work as a developer advocate at Contentful. For the folks who don't know about Contentful, I'm going to do a quick introduction. Contentful is a composable content platform with an API-first architecture, which means that you can orchestrate content from multiple platforms and publish them on any digital channel of your choice. I like to think about myself as an experimentalist because I try out different technologies, different weird frameworks, and then share that learning with the community. Recently, I've been working a lot with the Web HID API. I'm pretty sure not a lot of people know about it, but it's a pretty cool browser API, which allows you to connect your game controllers to your web applications, and I have been doing that with my PS5 controller. I've given a couple of talks around that as well, so feel free to check that out. And I am learning digital illustrations, so all these illustrations that you see over here are done by me. So again, no AI was used, it's all done by me. Moving forward, let's talk about the agenda. So I'm going to talk about the history of content management system, because coming in from a company that is basically a content management system, I would like to give you a bit more context about what it is and how things have evolved over time. And then we're going to look into the monolithic architecture. We're going to move into microservices, and then finally talk about the composable architecture, which is the main theme of this talk. All right, so let's start with the history of content management system. Now, even when before I was born, we had the internet and things were going pretty good. Like we did not have as many websites as we do right now, and everything was static. The images were static, even the text content was static, which meant that it was difficult to update the content because your content was stored within the code, which means that there was also no history of the content. Over here, I'm talking about the content and not the code. And this was time-consuming as well, because if you work in marketing and you wanted to make any changes to the content, you would have to go to the engineering team to get those changes. The engineering team would put up a Jira ticket and do it in one of their sprints, and this would also hold your engineering team back from shipping up new features. That's when the CMS came into the picture and they solved this approach. The CMS gave the marketing team, the editorial team, a platform to manage the content on their own. Yet again, the engineers were needed often when they wanted to make massive changes, but still this kind of reduced the amount of time that was, the engineering time that was needed. But it also introduced a couple of new things. It introduced the concept of client-side rendering. Now, instead of shipping out static websites, the website was being rendered on the client's machine, which means that the user was getting a slower experience on the browser. And this also introduced the monolithic architecture. The earlier CMS that we had were only focused on the websites. So if you were creating mobile applications, you would have to look at a different approach. You might want to use a different CMS for that. And with monolithic architecture, again, if you wanted to add new features, you would have to look within that ecosystem of the CMS that you are using. Well, the emergence of headless CMS changed everything that we do now. The headless CMS allowed you to use a single CMS to manage your content for your websites, for your mobile applications, for your voice-enabled applications, you name it. And again, because you were just using one single CMS, and this is an API-first approach, you could use any kind of front-end, no matter if you are a fan of React or Vue or Angular for your websites, or you just want to use plain HTML and JavaScript. If you are creating a native mobile application, you might do the native coding with Kotlin or Swift, or if you want to create a hybrid application, you might go with React Native or Flutter or Ionic. But with the emergence of a headless CMS, new systems also came into the picture, and platforms were not just using a headless CMS. There were platforms like digital asset management system, which a team started using to manage the digital content. And now this digital content can be PDF files, they can be audio files, they can be images, they can be videos as well. If you were building an e-commerce shop or an e-commerce store, you would use a product information management system to manage the information of your products. If you wanted to really have an e-commerce store, you would use an ECM. And then again, to manage your content, you would use a content management system. So all these platforms kind of became a bit difficult to work with because they had different API structure and they were working in silos. Which means the teams were now working in silos. The team that managed the product information would work in silos, and the team managing the content would work in silos. There was no exchange or communication happening between these teams, which resulted into inconsistent user experience. Your product page might say something else about the product, while your blog might say something completely different about the same product. And this also resulted into slow development because, again, you were dealing with different applications, you were dealing with different platforms for your web application. Now let's take a step back and let's talk about the different architectures that we have and how they help you solve these problems, but also what kind of limitations they have. Last week, I was in India visiting my friends and family, and I was talking about monolithic architecture, microservices, and composability with a couple of friends in a cafe. And that's where I came up with this analogy that I'm going to use in this talk, and hopefully it would make sense to you all as well. So when I talk about monolithic architecture, I like to think about them as a jigsaw puzzle. So jigsaw puzzles, if you don't know, it's basically image is broken down into different pieces, as you can see over here, and you need to connect these pieces in a certain way to have a complete image. And that's what a monolithic architecture basically is. Over here, you fit on the pieces and it completes the picture. But you cannot swap the pieces. If you swap the pieces, the picture would be incomplete, the picture might look broken. And that's what basically a monolithic architecture is. With monolithic architecture, there is again an issue of slow development speed because each and every piece is connected with each other. Unless and until you complete a part of that particular puzzle, you won't be able to finish the rest of the image, which means that you need to wait on the team who's working on a feature X to start working on your own feature. Then there was the problem of scalability. Reliability again became a problem. If one of the pieces was missing, your image was broken, you could not do anything at all. And again, there was no flexibility as well. You cannot again swap pieces from one puzzle and put it into another puzzle. It would again break the image and it would not look good. That's where the microservices came into the picture, and it kind of solved a couple of those problems that monolithic architecture had. And for microservices, I like to think about them as building blocks. No matter how you want to connect them, you can give them whatever shape you want, you can even change the order. Things are still gonna work. They're still gonna work, they're still gonna make sense because now they are independent of each other. And this brings me to composability. While I was learning and diving more into composability, I understood one clear thing, which I feel a lot of people don't understand. Microservices and composability are kind of the same thing. They are not different at all. Composability, the way I like to think about it is built on the concepts of microservices. And to understand composability, think about these building blocks as components over here. And these components have certain characteristics. First, it's modular. Each component is modular enough, and you can break them down further into different smaller components. And these components you can work individually without having to wait for the other component to be finished. And these components are also interoperable at the same time, which means that if you want to pass on information from one component to another, you can easily do so, but they are not dependent on each other. They are, again, independent on each other. So coming back to a previous question of how do we combine all these different platforms into one ecosystem is what we are doing over here at Contentful. So at Contentful, we are thinking about composability in two different ways. The first is you bring all your content that you have, all the information that you have, to one single platform and use one API call to publish this content to different platforms. Again, these platforms can range from websites, applications, to voice-enabled applications, to AR and VR as well. This big concept basically is known as orchestration, which means you bring your content from different platforms, and it allows you to reuse this content. So now, let's just say you have your product information stored in a PIM system. You can bring that into a CMS, and you can use that. You can reuse that content within your blog as well. To give you a quick overview of how this looks like, here is like the diagram for that. We have a data layer where basically your data is stored. Then you have your platform layer where you have your different services or different platforms, for example, for personalization, for A/B testing, for managing authentication. And then you have the experience layer. This is where the designers would use the content that you have from the platform layer and integrate that into the application. And then the channels is where you would like to publish and share it with your end user. Now, over here, you can see that you can, at the platform layer itself, you can bring out all the information, not just from the platform layer, but from the data layer to one single platform, and then use one single API to share this content. Now, why do we need a new architecture, and what advantages does it bring? So the first thing is it helps with scalability. Now you don't have to worry about scaling each and every component. All these components, because they are independent based on the usage, you can scale them and scale them down as and when needed. Because again, these components are independent of each other, they are flexible, and you have the power to swap them out if things are not working for you. For example, again, let's just take an example of a DAM. You are using a DAM platform, things were working fine, but with this whole AI hype, you want to use something new that is giving you more features, which is giving you maybe the autofill features that we saw in the previous talk, right? You can easily swap those things out, and you don't really have to worry about on the experience layer, or the development layer of the things, but it makes it really easy to swap things out as compared to the monolithic architecture. The next is the reusability. I already talked about it, but it allows you to bring content from different platforms. You can reuse the content easily, and you don't have to worry about the things that are being changed. Again, over here, if you take an example, your legal team is managing the privacy pages and terms and conditions pages as well. You are linking those pages on different channels, on different parts of your website. If your legal team wants to make any changes, they can easily go ahead and and make those changes. And because we are following the composable architecture, we don't have to worry about anything. It's going to automatically be published on all those places. And we are just reusing the information that we already have. And then there is consistency, again, because we are gathering the content from different platforms. We are making sure that it's consistent across the channels that we have, and the user are getting a seamless experience. And lastly, it's the development speed. Again, because now we have different components, team can work on different components in parallel, and they don't have to wait on someone else to finish their component and then start working on their component over here. So just to do a quick recap, monolith is, as I said, is kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. You cannot easily swap out pieces in there, and it's not flexible enough. However, microservices is like building blocks, which makes it easy for you to shape it however you want, bring whatever changes you want, bring whatever platforms you want. Composability is built on top of microservices, and it also brings the concept of reusability by adopting orchestration. Well, that's it from my side. Thank you all for joining in.